when they've finished?
Yes, please.
Switching my phone off. Voila.
I think at this point I'm going to admit, oh, maybe you already have.
Thank you for all joining us today for this press conference. My name is Marie van der Zyl and I am President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and the Board of Deputies is the democratic representative body representing Jews in the UK. With so much happening at the moment, we are really grateful to parliamentarians, activists and the press taking the time to listen to us. We are going to finish by 3 p.m. The first half an hour will be short speeches by our expert speakers, and in the second half, I will be opening the floor to questions from the press. Last month, we held another public meeting with former leader of the Conservative Party in Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, the Shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nandy, and others. The fact we have an excellent lineup today attests to the absolute seriousness of this issue, and I look forward to introducing our parliamentarians shortly. We are honoured to be joined by representatives of the World Uyghur Congress and the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, along with Dorrit Oliver Wolf, BEM, the inspirational Holocaust survivor, and we will hear from all of them soon. As the Jewish community, we are hesitant to consider comparisons to the murder of 6 million Jews and many others by the Nazis. But even so, when I wrote to the Chinese ambassador to the UK last July, I said, nobody could fail to notice the similarities between what is alleged to be happening in the People's Republic of China today and what happened in Nazi Germany 75 years ago. People being forcibly loaded onto trains, beards of religious men being trimmed, women being sterilized, and the grim spectre of concentration camps. We now have to ask, what choice will Britain and the world make? Will we leave the door open to potentially striking a preferential trade deal with the perpetrators and saying business as usual? Or will we oppose this with every means at our disposal? With this new revised amendment, we now have a second chance to make a real difference that could help shift the dial and stop this dreadful persecution. We urge every MP listening, please use your vote to support the amendment to the trade bill tomorrow. As the great Rabbi Hillel taught us, if not now, when? Please vote, it will make such a difference. I will now introduce our first speaker, Rahima Mahmoud from the World Uyghur Congress. Over to you, Rahima.
Thank you so much, for organizing this event, and it is in such timely, and we are going through, every Uyghur at the moment going through a very difficult time. You must have seen the BBC report recently about systematic gang rape and sterilization of Uyghur women in the so-called re-education camps. And today, the Essex Court Chamber opinion has been published. It outlined how there is a credible case that as part of a widespread and systematic attack on Uyghur people in the region, crimes against humanity are taking place, including enslavement, imprisonment, torture, rape, enforced sterilization, enforced disappearance, and persecution. And significantly, it further explains the credible case that the crimes of genocide is occurring. And I have worked with the BBC in translating, interpreting of those interviews with the survivors. And Sairagul Saidbayev, who's one of the camp teachers and survivor, and she described about this gang rape in public. And she said it was their way of testing those detainees, whether they have transformed. In other words, whether they have given up their humanity. While hearing the girl's painful plea, "Rescue me, please, help me, please," I felt I died. I was dead. So while I was translating these lines, I cannot explain to you how many times I died. And the only thing that keeps me going is to tell the truth, tell the stories of those who cannot speak for themselves. And I really urge MPs, and please give us the chance, give the Uyghurs a chance, stay in court. We need justice. This shouldn't be allowed to going on for so long. It's been 4 years. I lost contact with my own family. And in my last conversation with my brother, he said to me, "Please leave us in God's hands. We leave you in God's hands too." And that is the only way that I cope is God help us, God help them. Please protect them. And today I need your help. I need everyone to come together and to support and save Uyghurs, save my people. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we please now hear from Nuri Turkle, who is the from the US Commission on International Religious Freedoms. Over to you, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I wanted to begin by thanking the Board of Deputies for UK to organize this important event and including me in this important press conference. My name is Nuri Turkle. I'm a commissioner at the US Commission on International Religious Freedom. I'm also an advocate for the Uyghur human rights through my law practice and my advocacy work spanning almost 2 decades. So I have been personally living, breathing with the bad news keep coming out of the homeland since as far as I can remember. I came to the United States in 1995. It's been 25 years. I have not been able to return to the place of birth in a city that I call my ancestral homeland. I have not seen my own mother for 16 years. Last time I saw my mother was in 2004 when she came to the United States for my law school graduation. And the last time I saw my father was in 2014, briefly in Europe. So the reason that I'm mentioning this, because I wanted to highlight that what you're hearing, what you're reading about the crimes committed against the Uyghur people is not something new. This has been going on as long as I can remember for. So as someone who is in the US government, as someone who's been campaigning Uyghur rights in Washington, I can testify that the last 6-7 months has been historic and unprecedented as far as the legislative and executive decisions has been made by the United States government. It began with the enactment of the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act in June, coupled with a number of significant executive decisions, including over 50 Chinese entities being added to Commerce Department's entity list that is managed by the Bureau of Industry Security at the Commerce Department. Historically, traditionally, the entity list designation is made based on the national security concern. But the United States government applied this legal tool literally for the first time based on the human rights concern. And interestingly enough, the entire police department in the Uyghur region that the Uyghurs called East Turkestan have been added to the entity list. So the movie Mulan ironically credited one of those police departments in that movie, that controversial movie. So that is another, one of the many executive decisions. And also, like UK, United States has a global Magnitsky sanction, a very important legal tool that has been used against the Chinese officials, 4 Chinese officials, current and former government officials, including the Chinese Communist Party chief Chen Quanguo. And also significantly, I think this is the most significant executive decision that the United States made, sanctioning the Xinjiang Production Construction Corp that is largely responsible for the modern day slavery. That is also one of the most important critical facilitating factor for the ongoing genocide. So the XPCC reportedly has about 800,000 shell companies around the world that controls the water resources, cotton fields, and cotton production entities on the ground. And on top of these, the United States also imposed visa sanction on Chinese officials. And most recently, on January 19th, day before the new administration swore in, the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, made an announcement, a critical announcement, historic announcement, determining what is happening in the Uyghur region amounts to genocide and crime against humanity. Those of you who have followed the US politics are aware that since the United States ratified the Geneva Convention in 1988, the previous secretaries of state have only been made a similar decision 5 times. So this is the 6th times that the US government made similar determination. The first time obviously at Bosnia, and then Rwanda, Iraq, Darfur, and the most recently the Yazidis, genocide against Yazidis by the self-proclaimed Islamic State in 2016, 2017. So the initial procedure for these determinations has been varied. The United States government relied on evidence collected by the US government itself, the State Department, and policy and intelligence documents provided to the legal department, and also the witness testimonies and publicly available information to determine, make this determination. What is so significant about this decision in particular, I am going over some of the details in light of what we're focusing on today to encourage the UK Parliament to vote on this important amendment bill. This determination reflects an understanding that there can be a process for the atrocities determination as well as the prevention based on the finding that genocide can be committed without mass killing. That is exactly what is happening. Historically, no bad actor, no perpetrator brought in reporters, investigators to show how they're committing these crimes. And this determination is also consistent with the Genocide Convention, which prohibits the imposition of life condition calculated to destroy the target group and forced sterilization and transfer of children. So this is very significant. And also the determination also includes the crime against humanity, which is one of the core crimes prosecuted at Nuremberg, which captures this harm and can be charged even without firm evidence that perpetrators are acting with the intent to destroy the group in part or in whole. So, so now the decision, the reason that I am so animated about this particular topic is that in the face of these significant legislative executive decision, the United States has made in the last 7-8 months, the sky did not fall. And as someone who made home in the United States as a naturalized citizen and now is serving in the US government, I can say this on my personal capacity that I am so proud of my government for being this bold, this determinative, this specific. And I'm very pleased that there's across the board bipartisan support for this kind of a historic, unprecedented decision. As you've been reading in the news, that on the day that this decision was made, the incoming Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, told the Congress that this would be his decision. This would be the same, he would be making the same judgment. Ever since, literally every day, this issue has been covered. Thanks to my friend Rahima's contribution and BBC's excellent reporting of this horror, this news is gaining more traction. So it will be inconceivable for any UK parliamentarians to vote against this important bill that has been considered. If never again means anything to them. We're talking about lives in here. We're talking about your fellow citizens who have been disconnected, separated, tortured, and put in this anguish and put us in mental suffering as a result of the policies coming out of Beijing. Highlight this: Beijing is committing genocide as the International Committee is going about business as usual in business and political dealings.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And again, I remind everybody, if not now, when? When are we going to stop this happening? Can I now please ask Dorrit Oliver Wolf, a Holocaust survivor, please to speak to us. Thank you, Dorrit.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me and letting you know a little bit about how I feel so strong about any kind of inhumanity that is being at the moment. The Uyghur people are suffering. I'm a Holocaust survivor. I was 5 years old when the war started. And it was 5 years old when the first person spat in my eyes when I was walking down the street with my mother, calling me Buddha Jidom, which means stinking Jew. Now, at 5, it doesn't really matter what religion you are or who you are or what color you are. Nobody should feel to have the right to spit at a child. It is something that no child or grown-up anybody should experience. I didn't even know that we were Jewish. I didn't even understand. It is only when I saw my mother, how shocked she was. And she just squeezed my hand and turned around and we ran home. And the first place she entered was a jewelry shop, which she brought 3 little crosses, one for herself, one for me, and one for my grandmother. They were born in Hungary, so Budapest was their hometown. So it has started, and nobody, I mean, I as a child didn't understand it then. Now I'm 85 years old, and I don't understand it now. Why? But equally, I just can't stand by and do nothing about it, because I know what it is to be singled out, to be hungry, to be hiding, and to be afraid every moment that somebody is going to kill you. And my only crime, like 6 million other people's, the only crime was that we were Jewish. Surely that is equally the Uyghur people, the Uyghur people, the same. Being born in a different religion or a different color doesn't justify other people to single you out, to kill you, to have the right to take away your freedom. I cannot be just a bystander. I want to be able to help. And I'm asking those people who can do something about it, put aside your political views, bring out your humanity. It is inhuman. There are so many different color and different people in the world. We all have enough room and we all have the same right for life and living. I know how it is to be hiding. For 4 years, I have been picked up by the Nazis 3 times, separated from my mother. I have been escaping from places as a child. I don't know how I had the guts, but I was a gutsy girl even then. And when I'm looking out now and thinking of all these people everywhere who haven't got a roof over their heads, that's bad enough. But then to be taken away your human rights, your freedom. Freedom is the more important thing of all. I feel very strongly that it is everybody's duty. It is not something, oh, I do something. You have to do something about it, because tomorrow it could be your family. How would you feel about it? I have never met a Uyghur person. I met a lot of Chinese people. They're lovely people. I met a lot of German people. I refused to speak German after the war because the Germans killed all my family. Yet when I went to Germany, I was surprised how nice some of the Germans were. So it is not the individual person who is being cruel, it's the mass. And a mass is made out of many, many individuals. And by just standing by and saying nothing and hoping, oh, somebody else is going to say, and that somebody else is going to say somebody else. And before you know, everybody has got the right to kill everybody else and to make them, dehumanize them. I was homeless after the war. I was stateless. So it was very difficult. We went to Yugoslavia, that's where I was born, and it was a communist country. And you didn't have much freedom of the speech, but as a child, it was better than fascism. Later on, I was very lucky because we could go to Israel. And the first time that I was not afraid to say that I'm Jewish, because surprisingly enough, everybody else was Jewish. And nobody was afraid, nobody spat at anybody, and everybody was friendly. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. I had never known that there are so many Jewish people. Anyway, we later on left. And as a stateless person, no country let me in. So we ended up in Turkey, in Istanbul, where I went to be in high school. And as I didn't have a passport, I had to leave there as well. And when I returned to finish my A-levels, I could only return on the artist visa. So during the day, I was finishing my A-levels, and at night, I was dancing as a belly dancer, which was very difficult because I didn't have a belly and I was flat-chested. I was a good dancer, but that's the only reason that they gave me permission to stay there. So during the day, as I say, I was a schoolgirl, and at night, I was the...
Oh, Doris, thank you.
Anyway, all I want to say is I'm an author now and a public speaker, and I ask everybody who has any strength, vote for freedom of the people. Nobody deserves to be killed just because they have got a different religion.
Doris,
Thank you.
You're an inspiration. And again, I say to everyone, if not now, when are you going to stand up? When are you going to say it? Thank you. Could I now please ask to speak Nasrat Ghani, MP, Conservative MP, please, for Wealdon. Thank you, Nasrat.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, President. It's incredibly sobering, and it's a huge honour to follow Dorrit and her experiences and the death of millions of Jews. And now we are concerned about the plight of 2 million Uyghur in Xinjiang. And that is the motivation behind the Genocide Amendment in the trade bill. We want to make sure that the UK is never put in a position to be in any way engaged in trading with a genocidal state. People might think, well, that is obvious, but there is an issue here. The term genocide can only come to when there's been an investigation at a court, and normally you rely on the United Nations. But we know that the UN is a busted flush when it comes to investigating and preventing genocide, down to vetoes like countries such as China and Russia. So we are asking the UK government to remember its obligations to the United Nations, and as we can't rely on the UN courts to bring that back home to UK courts. What's curious about the Genocide Amendment is actually it's an absolute in keeping with government's policy. The government and the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary and many other ministers have repeatedly said at the dispatch box that the determination of genocide is for the courts. It is a judicial matter. So the Genocide Amendment honours our government's position, honours our obligations to the United Nations, allows a court on the balance of evidence to see if there is a determination of genocide. And the power then goes back to the executive, ministers in the UK Parliament and to MPs to debate how to take that forward. The plight of the Uyghur impacts us here in the UK. With 2 million in camps being involved in slave labour, those products are already here. But it's one thing to try and stop those products coming here. We need to be able to deal with the issue of genocide to begin with. And with that, we need a determination of genocide within a court. I'm asking MPs from across the House to support the Genocide Amendment. It is very limited, only deals with genocide. It is the most horrific of all crimes. And we want to make sure that as we set ourselves a new strategy post-Brexit and who we want to be as a country, that we don't go down the wrong path. And we're saying forcibly and clearly that we will not be trading with genocidal states. And if I may just offer one comment, Marie, before I finish. I recall a statement that the late Rabbi Sachs made when he was asked, where was God during the Holocaust? And the late Rabbi said, it's not where was God, it's where was man. Tomorrow, men and women can support the Genocide Amendment to ensure that when we say never again, we actually mean it.
Nazrat, thank you. Absolutely. Never again. And again, I also say, if not now, when will the world stand up to this? Let's do the right thing. Thank you. Could I now please ask Ian Blackford, MP, to address us, SNP Westminster leader and MP for Ross, Skye and Lochaber. Thank you. Ian.
Thanks, Marie, and thanks for all that you've done as the Board of Deputies to show leadership in this issue. It's been inspirational and really very moving to hear the testimony of Dorrit. If I may, Dorrit, there's a phrase that we have here in Scotland, we're all Jock Tanson's bairns. And that's a very important message, that all children, we're all equal, we're all born equal. And of course, we have a responsibility to humanity to look after each other. That phrase that Nusrat just used, never again. And in Parliament, I'm glad that we do shine a light on the horrors, on the evils of genocide as happened to the Jews under the Nazis. And it's right that we proclaim what happened at that time, and we seek to learn lessons from that period, that we seek to learn lessons from what happened in Srebrenica, what happened in Rwanda, and so many other places. But we have to hold a mirror up to ourselves, because when we sign books of condolences, when we sign books of remembrance, our responsibility as parliamentarians is to the here and now. And I'm ashamed that we lost that opportunity a couple of weeks ago to pass the amendment that so many have talked about today. And I want to appeal to parliamentarians right across the House, because this is not a party political issue. This is about man's inhumanity to man. And tomorrow, colleagues, friends, sometimes opponents, we can stand up. We can stand up and say, this is not in our name. And each and every one of us that's a member of Parliament has a privileged position. yes, first and foremost to represent our constituents, but to recognise those around the world, and in this case, those in Xinjiang that are facing persecution. We cannot turn away. We must not turn away. Tomorrow is our opportunity to do that right thing, to recognise that we cannot wait for someone else to take responsibility, that we must send a signal, that the Chinese must stop the persecution, that the labour camps must be closed, and yes, that we bring people to justice that have been responsible for this. Do not tomorrow pass up that opportunity. I don't just want to win that vote tomorrow, I want to win it well, with parliamentarians recognising their responsibility to humanity. Now is that time. Thank you.
I absolutely agree. Parliamentarians must recognise their duty to humanity, and if not now, when are they going to do it? This is one of the greatest crimes against humanity. It cannot be ignored. Could we now please thank you and welcome to speak Lord Alton of Liverpool, who is a crossbench peer and author of the Lord's Amendment. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Marie. Who couldn't be moved in listening, as we did a few moments ago, to what Dorrit said to us about the horrors of the Holocaust. I was struck just a few days ago as we were commemorating the liberation of Auschwitz's 75th anniversary. I was struck by some words that I read by Judge Thomas Bergenfall, who was a young boy incarcerated in Auschwitz and who survived the Holocaust. He said this: "The human mind is simply not able to grasp this terrible truth. A nation was transformed into a killing machine, programmed to destroy millions of innocent people for no reason other than that they were different. If we humans can so easily wash the blood of our fellow humans off our hands, then what hope is there for sparing our future generations from a repeat of the genocides and mass killings of the past?" He said, "One cannot hope to protect mankind from crimes such as those that were visited upon us unless one struggles to break the cycle of hatred and violence that invariably leads to ever more suffering by innocent human beings." It's not surprising, therefore, for me, but it's the Board of Jewish Deputies who have been to the fore and so steadfast in their support for this amendment to break this circle. If you go back to the 1948 Convention on the Crime of Genocide, and of course even the word itself was coined by Raphael Lemkin, a Jewish lawyer who saw 49 of his relatives murdered in the Holocaust. He chose that, he invented that word to describe man's inhumanity to man, but to chart a new way forward. And inside the 1948 Convention, it has a very high threshold in describing what genocide is. And as people consider the amendment before the House of Commons tomorrow, it's important to remember how high that threshold is, not least because of the difficulty anyone would have in bringing a vexatious case or simply complaining about a human rights violation as though in some way that were comparable with this crime above all crimes of genocide. Let me just read you the definition in Article 2 of what a genocide actually is. It's any one of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within that group, or forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. As we heard earlier on, there are serious allegations, some of which have been examined by lawyers in the United Kingdom, and we've seen only today the opinion of Essex Chambers, who have looked at what's happening in Xinjiang to Uyghurs, and they believe that what is happening there meets this threshold. But the problem, Mary, that we face is that whenever a parliamentarian in either house raises this issue, they're told only a court can make that judgment. The Prime Minister said it, the Foreign Secretary said it, ministers have said it from dispatch box after dispatch box for 40 long years they've said it. And of course, The truth is there is no competent court, either in this country or in the United Nations, where in the Security Council, a country like China would simply veto any application to refer themselves, for instance, for examination for what is happening in Xinjiang. So the only way to break that circle, as we heard before, our duty to break the circle in every generation, the only way to do that is the passing of an amendment which would refer to our own courts the opportunity to examine the evidence against that very high threshold and to decide whether a genocide is underway. Now, I've stood by mass graves. A few months ago, I was in Simile. It was a place in northern Iraq, which Lemkin had himself studied in the 1930s because the Assyrians faced a genocide there, along with the Armenians. He studied those events and those atrocity crimes. I've stood alongside charred remains of villages in Burma and Darfur. I've stood by the mass graves of people murdered in Rwanda in a genocide. We can and must try to stop that circle from going on and on and on. If ever I hear that slogan, never again, I will despair. Here is an opportunity, as you said, Mary, now for us to break the circle, to act. And I want to thank you again for your leadership, but also to thank those, both in the Lords and the Commons. Last week in the Lords, by a massive margin, the House of Lords endorsed the amendment, and with 359 votes, a majority of 171. And when it was defeated the previous week in the Commons by a slender margin of 11, it showed that overwhelmingly across the political divide and across both houses, people want action taken on this. So if they haven't done it already, I would urge people who are looking at this call to pick up their phones and ring their member of parliament. And Nusrat Ghani was right when she quoted Rabbi Sachs, who said, "Don't ask where was God at Auschwitz, ask where was man." Well, we will be asking MPs tomorrow, where were you and where will you be when the division comes in the House tomorrow? So I would plead with people, if they haven't taken action yet, then to do so rapidly, because time is now against us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Walton. And absolutely, this is a matter of conscience across the political divide. And now is the time to act. Could I now please ask to come to the floor Arif Abraham, who is a renowned barrister specialising in international criminal law, and he regularly advises policymakers and parliamentarians on foreign policy and rule of law issues. Thank you, Arif.
Thank you very much, Marie. There are some here who might be worried about the law relating to the Genocide Amendment. Does the law allow it, and can this amendment really work? And the answer to both questions is a simple yes. The UK, like all other states in the world, is under a duty to prohibit, prevent, and punish genocide. Now, for 50 years at least, our government's position has been that we can only start considering these legal obligations once a court or tribunal has determined that genocide has occurred. So each time the issue of genocide is raised, asking the UK to look at whether its trade or other policies conflict with our obligations under the Genocide Convention, the response is always the same. This is a legal question for a court. Now, that is not what actually international law says should happen. The law says, and it's clear, that the instant a state learns, or should have learned, of a serious risk of genocide, the government must use all means reasonably available to them to prevent genocide. That is something that the government should do and must do already, and it's an ongoing duty. And the amendment does nothing to change that. What the amendment does do is that if the UK fails to discharge that obligation to prevent, and says to us, well, we can't be sure this is genocide, then the High Court is given the opportunity and it's given the powers to deliver a preliminary view on that question. And that is so that there isn't inaction. It will then be for the government, by consulting Parliament, to decide on what steps, if any, Parliament should take in respect of trade or other policy issues. So in my mind, the issue here is very simple. This is a complementary mechanism to ensure at the very minimum we uphold our international obligations, but there's nothing to stop the government doing more. And I sincerely hope so that it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif. And can I thank all of the speakers for all of your heartfelt, impassioned speakers on behalf of the Uyghurs, and indeed the coalition that we've built of Uyghurs, British parliamentarians from all parties and Jews acting in solidarity is something that we are truly, truly proud of. And it is a testament to the absolute strength of feeling, of conscience at this critical time. This is absolutely a critical time to act. Now is the time. I'd now like to open the floor, please, to questions either from members of the press and MPs from the APP on British Jews. Please use the raise hand function. I will then ask you to give me your question and ask the most appropriate person to answer. So thank you. We're now open to any questions. So if you just bear with me. Okay. Right, so one question that I have been given here is, won't the courts be flooded with nuisance claims if this amendment passes? So I think Nusrat, do you want? You've got your hand up as well? Yes. Do you want to answer that one?
Thank you. I can. Thank you. I will begin, and Arif will come in behind me. There are two important things to remember here. We're talking about genocide. It is the most heinous of all crimes. So to reach that threshold, we have to think about the sort of cases that come forward. I suspect if the amendment passes, the sort of cases that can come forward are only two: the Rohingya or the Uyghur. There are no other cases that can be considered, considering the depth of deprivation and destruction against a race or a nation that has to be reached. The second is this: the new Genocide Amendment has within it enough legislative framework to ensure that the UK government can set its own standards and perimeters around the sort of cases that can come forward. But Marie, we must focus on what we're talking about, which is genocide. So we're talking about an incredibly high threshold, which is hopefully in our lifetimes only going to be reached once or twice. Arif can probably allude to the absolute subsection of the amendment I'm talking to.
Okay, over to you, Arif. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Nus. Yes, the revised amendment is absolutely clear, and essentially there is a provision dealing with the regulations, and within that provision, essentially the government is given full discretion to determine the form, the content and criteria for applications, and the government is also given complete discretion to set the rules of procedure and the rules of evidence on how these applications are considered. So when you take all of that together, it's for the government to set these criteria. And as Nus said, this is genocide. There are very few instances of genocide, but sadly they still occur. So combined with the stringent legal test for genocide, together with regulations which the government will bring before Parliament again to implement this amendment, you can be assured that courts will give very short shrift to vexatious claims.
Thank you. The next question that's been sent to me, perhaps our parliamentarians also might want to answer this. Why not accept the government's compromise amendment? Who would like? Nusrat, again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The compromise amendment offers a select committee process. A select committee can already prepare a report on genocide and has done so. Three particular cases come to mind: the Yazidis and the Uyghur, and no action was taken. The select committee process has no obligation on the government. And fundamentally, a select committee can, if it wished to, produce a report on genocide as it can now, but it is meaningless when the government has said repeatedly, that the only time that they will accept, use, recognise the term genocide is when it has been discussed, debated, evaluated, and come to a determination in a judicial setting. So without the courts, the UK government, just as it hasn't done in the last 75 years, will not accept the term genocide. So we need a court process engaged in this, which is why the Genocide Amendment focuses on the courts, but all they are doing is determining genocide. They have no authority elsewhere. So the Genocide Amendment fits in with UK government policy. A select committee process is meaningless because it offers nothing new and doesn't get to the crux of the problem, which is genocide can only be assessed and determined by the courts, which is a UK government's position.
Okay, thank you. Now, Patrick Wintour from The Guardian, who's online, asked this question: could one of the parliamentarians explain their objections to the Foreign Affairs Committee being asked to investigate genocide, the government proposal, and does the Foreign Affairs Committee want this role? Now, I think that's been partly answered, but Patrick, I can see you're online. Do you want to ask a follow-up question to that? If you'd like to unmute, otherwise I can go on to the next speaker, and you can ask me that. You are unmuting. Thank you.
Yes, could you just, the second part of my question is, does the Foreign Affairs Committee or its sister body in the Lords want to actually undertake this role, because it's relevant to know whether they wish to do it?
Marie, can I come in, and can Lord Alton follow me, please?
Okay, fine, that's right, fine.
Thank
and then
you.
Lord Alton, go on.
Thank you so much. So I've already explained that what's been offered via the Select Committee process is meaningless because it offers no authority on genocide. And today the papers are reporting that both the committees in the House of Commons and the House of Lords have also rejected the proposal because it is a meaningless process. It is a wrecking amendment to wreck the Genocide Amendment. I'll hand over to Lord Alton for more texture.
Thank you, Lord Alton.
Well, I think others put it very well, Patrick, in answering your question. But both select committees, as I understand it, have said that they would not wish to take on this role without having the opportunity, which is what is in the amendment, to then refer the issue to the High Court. So if the government was serious about a compromise, they would incorporate within this proposal the opportunity for select committees, which, as Naz has just said, already have the ability to examine whether a genocide is underway or not. But the frustration for a select committee would be that it would take a huge amount of time and energy and effort. And of course, there would be partiality as well, because people on select committees by definition have opinions and views. I have opinions and views. I serve on the International Relations Select Committee of the Lords. I'm not impartial in the way that a judge would be impartial. But if this were used as a sifting mechanism to sort out the first call, if you will, on what constitutes a genocide, and Xinjiang is a good example of this, it could have a look at the situation there, but it would need to have the power to then send it on to the court. And that, of course, is what the government have been opposed to. I was very struck that at a briefing for peers last week, government ministers said, and I quote them directly, that the amendment might create diplomatic difficulties. Well, that's actually the intention of the amendment, to create diplomatic difficulties if a state is committing crimes of genocide. You can't simply go on with business as usual. So I'm not surprised that particularly members of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee have been so outspoken in saying that they will not be used as a fig leaf.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think that Ian Blackford would also like to come in on this question. Ian.
Yeah, I would, just to say absolutely unequivocally, this is a wrecking amendment. That's all it is. It's about trying to create that distraction from what we should be doing, which is passing the amendment that's come from the Lords. The select committees do fantastic work. They should be applauded for the work that they do. But this is about a sidetrack. This is not about getting a resolution to the problem that we face in Xinjiang. So I would ask all parliamentarians not to be seduced by what is a distraction, but what is a wrecking amendment. Everyone must support the amendment that's coming to us from the Lords tomorrow.
Thank you very much. We've got a question here for Lord Alton. It's just come into the chat. Trade Policy Minister Greg Hands has also pointed out that the UK doesn't have, nor is it pursuing, a bilateral trade deal with China. But the UK has a bilateral trade investment treaty with China from 1986 and many other small trade agreements. What would happen to those deals if this amendment passed? Who would like to come in on this one, please?
Well, I can very quickly say that a reply was given to my parliamentary colleague, Baroness Cox, last week, when she asked the Trade Minister in the House of Lords, Lord Grimstone, what was the trading situation with China, because the government keeps on saying, oh, we don't have a free trade agreement. Well, we're not talking about having a free trade agreement with China. In their reply to Lady Cox, they said, I quote, China is an important trading partner for the UK, and we are pursuing increased bilateral trade. So it would then be a matter for Parliament to decide if the High Court, under the terms of this amendment, said there is evidence that there is a genocide underway. It would then be a matter for the executive, that is the government, and for Parliament to decide what action it then wants to take in terms of future trading agreements with that country. But yes, there would then be the opportunity for Parliament to say it will not be business as usual. There will not be a whole succession of new trade arrangements or even continuation of the current ones. And I would simply throw into the equation, under the 2015 modern slavery legislation, we are already, in my view, in breach of that legislation. When you look at some of the items, the goods, the procurements that take place from Xinjiang, many major household names buying goods from Xinjiang, which have been made by slave labor. So we are already in breach of the law, and it's about time companies and individuals who are making seedy profits on the backs of slave labor were taken to the courts and taken to task.
Thank you for that. Another question that's coming to me directly, does this amendment undermine the United Nations? Anybody want to come in on that one?
I'm very happy.
Arif, thank you.
Oh, let Arif take it.
And then I'll come back to you. Apologies, Lord Alton. Arif.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Lord Alton. Absolutely not. So this is a complementary mechanism. Essentially, there are UN mechanisms. So for individuals, there's the International Criminal Court. For states, there's the International Court of Justice. Now, if you are not party to those instruments, or if you have reservations on them, then you cannot be brought before those courts or mechanisms. However, the UN Convention on Prohibition and Prevention of Genocide is clear that even if you do not sign up to those mechanisms, you have a duty to prohibit, prevent, and punish genocide. So the duties still exist, yet the mechanisms are not there and can't be utilized. So what this amendment does is it ensures that at least the UK is upholding its duty to prevent, its duty to prohibit, and its duty to punish. If a determination is made, at least we have discharged that obligation of finding of genocide, and then the consequences and the legal consequences that flow from that is for Parliament and the executive to decide. So in a way, what we are doing is we are reinforcing and complementing the existing system. Yes, ideally, a case where it's possible can be brought before the International Court of Justice. However, and I'll say that in 70 years of its operation, the UK has never brought a state before the International Court of Justice alleging another state has violated its duties under the convention. In respect of some states, that's impossible because they have reservations on that convention.
Lord Alton, thank you, Arif.
Arif has summed it up brilliantly. I'd only add the dimension of the International Criminal Court, which was established under the Rome Statute, and was again an attempt by the international community to start bringing people to justice for terrible atrocities. But we've all seen the way in which countries like Russia and China use their veto powers at the Security Council to prevent any referrals of countries that might be linked to them, or indeed themselves, to the ICC. 6 years ago, the United Nations asked Mr. Justice Kirby to conduct a commission of inquiry into crimes and human rights violations in North Korea. He came back and said at the end of his inquiry, crimes against humanity are being committed in North Korea. He said, quote unquote, it was a state without parallel. What happened? It has never been referred, despite his recommendation in that report. It was a UN-sponsored inquiry. It's never been referred to the International Criminal Court. And when you ask the British Foreign Office why not, they say, oh, China will use its veto. So much as I would like to see the international mechanisms working effectively, they do not, which is why we need a competent court in the United Kingdom to deal with these matters.
Thank you. And I know that Nuri would like to come in next on that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The genocide that we know, that the world has known, have several commonalities, particularly 3 genocidal campaigns in the last 10 years. Campaign against Yazidis, the Rohingyas, and the Muslims. It's all based on religious identity, ethnic identity. And also the international community, for the most part, failed to act. That's why we've been keep seeing it. In less than 10 years, we're seeing 3 genocidal campaigns. Should give anyone in the UK Parliament a pause to any objection decision that they're heading to make. And 3, this genocide has 2 important aspects. 1, technology. 2, trade. The Chinese government in particular has used Uyghur modern-day slavery to pollute the global economic system with the tainted products. As we speak, United States, for example, remains to be the largest destination for Xinjiang-produced products. Italy remains to be one of the largest export destinations. So this is just not the United States or just the UK or other governments can deal type of problem. This is a very, very important bill. As Lord Elton said, that this is actually not about diplomatic difficulty, if I'm not misquoting him. This actually makes the diplomacy better. This should be used as a leverage. And just going a business as usual with this particular government when it's trading on genocide is simply unconscionable. Genocide determination is almost as important as prevention of future genocide. So what you're doing is actually preventing future genocidal campaigns.
Can I just ask you quickly, because after this, I know that Dorrit wants to make a final comment and then Edwin is going to close. Nuri, if this amendment doesn't go through, do you feel that the UK is in danger of falling behind the USA in terms of human rights?
Absolutely, absolutely. The Uyghur people, those of us who care, work on human rights, have been looking for leadership in the UK for so long. This is something that the United Kingdom should take a leadership role in Europe.
Thank you.
Because it has done it before and it could do it again. And this is not something new to the British people or British politicians. It just needs to be decisive and needs to recognize the danger. This will be huge disappointment to the international community, particularly to your own British citizens of Uyghur origin. Think about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Dorrit, I know that you would like to give a short address to MPs.
Now, I'm not a politician, and if I was, by now I would be stoned or beaten or anything you like. I listened very carefully, and something that was missing from all the questions from the newspaper and the journalists about humanity. I heard about the trade. We cannot not trade with people because this is done by so and so. This is not a question of profit or trade or commerce. It is the question of people being murdered, of innocent people being killed. What is the price of humanity in that? How much are you putting on each person who is being killed is worth so many pounds or whatever money? It seems to me it's a question, are we going to do trade or not going to do trade? Are we going to miss out? Are we going to make less? Can we afford this? But that's a lot of crap, excuse me if I may say that. I am speaking as somebody, I know all my family was killed. I'm the only person who was survived and my mother. And I was innocent. I was a child. I didn't understand it then, and I don't understand it now. So the basic factor that it is mass murder, genocide, they are human beings, doesn't matter what color, what race, what religion, there are children, there are women, there are men who have lost their freedom, their dignity, dehumanized and being mass murdered and being harvested apparently for the body parts. This is wrong. This is not a political question. This is, never mind on what side and who is in which party, that is irrelevant. What is the price of each human being? That is what I would like to know.
Absolutely. All of my grandfather's family were murdered. He came here on the Kinder transport. Absolutely. Ian, I'm really sorry. It's going to have to be very short, and then I'm going to ask Edwin to speak. Thank you, Ian.
What is the price of human being? How much price that you're putting on each person?
Dorrit, you cannot put a price on human life. Humanity must come first. And it's that obligation that we have as leaders to make sure that we stand up for those that are being persecuted. And the normal rules of trade cannot apply when people are being persecuted. The import of cotton from the work factories cannot be allowed. It must be stopped. There needs to be a very firm statement and commitment tomorrow that we stand up for those that are being persecuted, just as you were and your family were, and so many others in the 1930s. The Kinder transport was a fantastic thing. We need to show that same generosity of spirit and support to those that are suffering persecution today.
Thank you. Edwin, could I please ask you to give some closing remarks, and then I will thank everybody and the meeting will come to an end. Edwin.
This has been a most powerful session on the eve of tomorrow's vote in the Commons. None more so than the words, the haunting words and inspirational ones of Dorrit Oliver Wolf, a witness to unimaginable terrors she bore witness to in the Holocaust. I want to salute on behalf of all of us, Rahima Mahmoud and Nurit Uncle. I know and you know the sacrifices they do every time they show themselves in public and fight for their own people. They have not seen their own families for decades, and God knows what happens to them every time they show up. To them, I have our respect and we salute them. The least we could do tomorrow is to get together for the MPs to hold this as their own responsibility and to make sure they support the amendment without fail and with a big majority. I want to thank those MPs and peers who came up today and spoke so candidly and so frankly. Our message to every member of parliament is, please support the Genocide Amendment tomorrow. Please make sure your colleagues are aware of the importance of that and in the importance of Britain keeping its position as a supporter of human rights. The Jewish community has a special responsibility, and we stood up right there, right from the beginning. More than a year ago, the Board of Deputies organized in the House of Parliament with a full house, a session called Warning to Humanity. Marie van der Zyl led by writing to the Chinese ambassador, and the late Lord Sachs of blessed memory spoke so candidly and so fiercely. Elie Wiesel once said, "Let us remember, what hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. We will not be silent anymore."
So true.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank everyone. Please all vote for the amendment. It's an absolute matter of conscience. Don't let this happen. It's within all of us to make such a critical difference. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for attending. Thank you.